They said punk was dead. They said print was dead. Well, they lied. Are you ready to get your fingers smudgy? Maybe earn a paper cut or two? The wait is over. Punk Dumpster is the underground punk zine you didn't know you needed. Fresh ink, cheap paper, and no algorithm in sight. Packed with interviews, rants, reviews, art, comics, and more. No likes, no swipes, just staples. Want to snag a copy? DM us on Instagram at Punk Dumpster Zine. See you at the show.
Welcome to Leaving America, the podcast for anyone who's ever looked around and thought, maybe we should get out of America while we still can. On today's episode, we're heading far south, spotlighting a country that probably isn't on your radar, South Africa. When Americans talk about moving abroad, they usually start with Europe or Latin America. But South Africa, it's often overlooked, and unfairly so. South Africa is complex, breathtaking, and sometimes contradictory. It's a country of rugged coastlines, vast savannas, and sophisticated cities. It offers an affordable cost of living, a temperate climate, world-class wine, and English as one of its official languages. But it's also a nation with a difficult history, a layered society, and a frustrating bureaucracy. This episode is for anyone who's considered a leap into something less predictable and more thrilling. We'll talk visa options, cost of living, healthcare, cultural integration, and the path to permanent residency and citizenship. And for the purposes of making this understandable to an American audience, in this episode, I'm noting all currency in US dollars based on the exchange rate at the time of this recording. Just be aware that that rate can change a bit as the markets fluctuate. I'm your host, Sean C. Fettig, and if you've ever thought life might make more sense beneath Table Mountain with a glass of pinotage in hand, you're absolutely in the right place. To stay updated on the latest episodes, follow, like, and share Leaving America on the Deep Dive with Sean podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've realized that trusting Congress with your future is riskier than betting on the Rand, or you're wondering whether Cape Town might be a better bet than DC, email us at deepdivewithsean@gmail.com. All right, pack your bags. This is Leaving America.
I mean, I think people often forget that South African democracy only started in 1994. That was when apartheid ended and when Nelson Mandela became the president. So it's only been just over 30 years. And there's a lot of turmoil in the government, and especially in the Home Affairs Department, which is like the American version of Homeland Security or immigration. So the laws have changed constantly. I've been on many different visas over the years. When I first came, I had visitor visas. Then I had a life partner visa because I had a South African partner. It was a long story, but my partner actually died about a year and a half after I came. And then I had a work visa, which was 5 years long. And I thought after that, having that work visa for 5 years, that I would be able to apply for permanent residency, which is like the equivalent of a green card. But then in 2014, there was a huge overhaul of all the visa laws, and they made it much, much harder to get permanent residency. And just sort of as a side note, South Africa has big issues with immigration, similar to, I guess, Europe and America and lots of other places, just because of the way Africa is. And, there's so many different countries and lots of different issues going on in the neighboring countries, like especially Zimbabwe, which also has a very unstable government with a very, very poor economy, and Mozambique, which has issues, which is also a bordering country. South Africa has a lot of immigration issues, a lot of undocumented immigrants and a lot of xenophobia, and those things all kind of bleed over into the immigration and visa rules. So right now I actually have a retirement visa, which is a 4-year visa, and I actually tried to get it a few years ago, and I was turned down the first time, and then I tried again. There is no minimum age for the retirement visa. I'm currently 50 years old. But you just have to prove that you have a certain amount of income each month, which, and if you can prove you have a certain amount of income each month for a total of 4 years, they will give you a 4-year retirement visa, which I'm going to have to renew again at the end of those 4 years. And then maybe after that, I'll be eligible for permanent residency, but I don't actually know because the rules are always changing. So I've been here 15 years. I still do not have permanent residency, and as a side note, I also have a South African partner now. And people often say, oh, well, it's so simple. Just marry your South African partner and then you can become a citizen. But it actually doesn't work that way. Getting a spousal visas only last for 2 years. You have to renew it at least 3 times before you can even apply for permanent residency. And then often you have to wait several years for your permanent residency application to be approved. So it is not easy, is the short answer to that very long diatribe I just gave you. But there's always a way.
That was Heather Mason, American expat living in South Africa and creator of the blog 2 Summers that focuses on her experience, explaining how the many different visa pathways in South Africa have benefited her. Immigrating to South Africa isn't like picking up a SIM card at the airport and going on your way. It takes time, documentation, and a fondness for notaries. But it's far from impossible. South Africa's immigration options tend to be more tailored than broad. You don't have a catch-all visa like Portugal's D7, but you do have viable pathways, especially if you have income, skills, or a little entrepreneurial spirit. So let's take a look at some of the major options for Americans, starting with the retired person's visa. If you're over 55 and looking to retire or semi-retire, in a place where your dollars go further, this might be your best bet. It requires a guaranteed income of at least roughly $2,000 a month, give or take. And this income can be from pensions, investments, rental income, or annuities. You also have to prove that the income is guaranteed for life or long term. You also have to have health insurance and a clean criminal record. This visa can be issued for up to 4 years and is renewable. And it's attractive because you don't need to give up U.S. residency. And you don't need to work. You just need to show the means to support yourself. And South Africa offers a lifestyle that feels far more luxurious on a moderate income than nearly anywhere in Europe. For those with serious assets, think high net worth individuals, the financially independent permit might be the best route. You have to prove a net worth of around $650,000 to $700,000 US dollars. There's also a non-refundable fee of about $6,500 US dollars. And you have to prove that your assets are under your control. The pros to this visa are that it grants permanent residency right away, and you don't need to work, invest, or retire. Just be wealthy enough to meet the bar. The cons are that bar is high, and processing can take 12 to 24 months, so it's a long game. But this option is ideal for digital nomads or entrepreneurs who want flexibility and a plan B. If you're planning to open a cafe in Cape Town or a boutique guest house in the Karoo, you'll want the business visa. This requires a minimum investment of about $270,000 US dollars into a South African business. And you have to create at least 60% South African citizen employment. You have to submit a thorough business plan and get support from the Department of Trade and Industry. The upside to this visa is that it allows permanent residency applications after 5 years and lets you live and work in the country while running your business. The downside is that the red tape is thick. You're going to deal with multiple departments and processing times can be pretty long. Also, starting a business in a new country isn't for the faint of heart. The critical skills visa is South Africa's version of the skilled worker visa. If you have expertise that the country needs, they'll give you a visa for up to 5 years. Some common in-demand fields are information technology or IT, engineering, medicine and healthcare, education, especially STEM and special education, and artisanal trades, so plumbers, electricians, welders. To work through this process, you have to match your qualifications to South Africa's critical skills list, and you have to get a credential evaluation from the South African Qualifications Authority, SAQA, and submit proof of experience and education. This is a strong path to permanent residency, especially if you secure a job once you're there. If you're married or in a long-term relationship with a South African, you can apply for a spousal or life partner visa. It allows residence and sometimes work rights depending on the visa. You'll have to prove cohabitation and financial interdependence, so shared expenses. You'll have to have a shared address and a willingness to renew and report regularly. It's a solid option, but it requires evidence and a little patience with interviews and renewals. So that's the general lay of the land. It's not exactly frictionless, but it's definitely not impossible. If you have income, skills, or commitment, and you're not in a rush, South Africa will meet you halfway. So now let's talk about the cost of living, money, specifically how far yours goes in South Africa. To put it bluntly, South Africa offers one of the highest standards of living for the lowest cost of any middle-income country. It's not perfect, and we'll talk about that. But in terms of bang for your buck, you'll be hard-pressed to beat it. Heather Mason provides some context and the current lay of the affordability land.
So when I moved here in 2010, the value of the South African currency is the rand. And at that time, the value of the rand to the dollar, it was about 6.25 or 6.50 to the dollar. So that was pretty good even then. But because of all the issues that the South African government has had over the last decade, the value of the rand has dropped dramatically. I think today it's about 18 rand to the dollar. So the cost of living here for anyone who's coming with a Western currency, you know, dollars, euros, Canadian dollars, whatever, is really the cost of living here is really low, which is causing all these interesting kinds of dynamics and you see this on social media and hear people talking about it. It's not just in South Africa. There's, you know, and it's also because of the rise of digital nomadism. There's a lot of people from Europe and America moving to places like South Africa because it's so cheap if you're coming with euros or dollars. And by the way, the South African government did recently release a digital nomad visa. It's brand new. I don't actually know anyone personally who has gotten it. And it's pretty strict. The conditions I think you have to have a full-time job. You can't be a freelancer, and you have to have an income, I think, of like $55,000 a year or something like that. But there are people coming, even just coming and staying on the tourist visa for 3 months and then leaving and coming back. And that does create sort of tension. And I'm especially seeing it on social media and like on TikTok. There's a lot of people in Cape Town, South Africans in Cape Town, you know, sort of griping about when are these Europeans and Americans going to leave? Like they're driving up the prices of our affordable housing. So yeah, and it's interesting because I've lived here for such a long time. I came here long before there was even such thing as a digital nomad. And, you know, and I am in Johannesburg, which is not the quote unquote desirable city in South Africa. You know, most of the digital nomads are in Cape Town. So I feel like I don't put myself into that category, but at the same time, I still have dollars, you know, well, I actually had a really good freelance job up until very recently. I worked as a consultant for a U.S. government contractor, and that work has all been canceled since USAID was demolished. But anyway, beside the point, my money is still in dollars, which results in it just makes it really affordable for me to live here, which is great. But there's always like a little bit of I feel weird sort of celebrating that and talking to my South African friends about it because it's a really bad thing for the country. That the currency here is so devalued, but it does so happen that it makes it much easier to relocate here. If you're able to get the visa and you have good financial standing in the U.S., you're going to find it very affordable here. You know, rent, food, travel, almost everything is cheaper.
As far as housing, we can think of lifestyle in roughly 3 tiers, and that's based on where you live. If you want to live in Cape Town, you're going to be getting cosmopolitan with a view. Rent for a nice 1-bedroom in a trendy neighborhood is going to cost about $650 to $1,100 a month. Utilities cost about $50 to $100 a month, and internet is about $35 a month. Cape Town is the most expensive city in South Africa, but it's still far cheaper than New York, LA, or even Lisbon. And the cost reflects the lifestyle: mountains, beaches, food, and wine in one of the world's most scenic urban settings. If you're looking for something more urban and affordable and underrated, you might look at Johannesburg, where Heather Mason chose to live. Rent for a modern one-bedroom costs about $430 to $800 a month. And there are lower overall prices for transport, food, and housing, and a bigger expat community and a strong business hub. If you plan to live on a retirement budget, you can choose coastal towns or the interior. Places like George, Knysna, or parts of the Eastern Cape offer slower pace and even lower prices. You could rent a full house for $325 and live very comfortably on $1,200 to $1,500 a month total. Groceries are also relatively cheap. Bread is about 80 cents a loaf, milk is about $1.30, and wine you can get excellent bottles for under $5. If you want to eat out, a casual cafe meal will cost about $5 to $8, and an upscale dinner with wine, $20 to $30. Eating out in South Africa is both affordable and a cultural staple, and yes, the food and wine scenes are phenomenal. As it relates to transportation, Uber is widely used and it's cheap. Expect about $2 for a short ride. And car ownership is common, especially outside Cape Town and Johannesburg. Gas or petrol costs about $5 a gallon. And if you're flying somewhere, domestic flights are incredibly affordable. $30 to $60 gets you between major cities. So yes, your dollars stretch. But I guess the next question is, does that extend into quality healthcare? And it can if you plan accordingly. South Africa has a two-tier healthcare system: public, which is state-funded and overstretched, and private, which is world-class and often used by locals who can afford it, and nearly all expats. Public healthcare is available to all residents, including foreigners. The services are low cost or free, but there are long waits, limited equipment, and inconsistent quality, especially in rural areas. So unless you're a permanent resident with few resources, most expats avoid public healthcare except in emergencies. Private healthcare is where South Africa really shines. You can get high-quality care at affordable prices. There are private hospitals in major cities that rival those in the US or Europe. There are English-speaking doctors and easy appointment scheduling and fast diagnostics. In the private system, a GP visit will cost you about $18 to $30. A specialized visit will cost about $35 to $60, and surgery is up to 70% cheaper than in the United States. So you're going to want South Africa's version of health insurance, private medical aid. There are numerous plans, including Discovery, Momentum, Bonitas, and most of them are customizable. You can expect to pay about $80 to $160 a month for solid coverage. You can also self-insure if you're on a budget, since out-of-pocket costs are relatively low. The bottom line is, if you're moving from the US, South African healthcare will feel like a luxury spa at Walgreens prices. So now let's talk about daily life, because my guess is that you wouldn't be moving just for the currency conversion. There are probably other reasons, but baked into that is probably the fact that you're looking for something different. And South Africa is very different. Heather Mason describes some of the culture shock she experienced when she moved to South Africa.
There are definitely so many different things. I mean, there's like sort of the small sort of joking things, which is like the linguistic stuff. Like the example that we joke about the most is in South Africa, traffic lights are called robots. So, and no one seems to really know why that is, but it's really confusing when you first get here and you ask someone directions and they say, go to the robot and turn right. You're sort of imagining like, where's the robot? And there's lots of funny little examples like that we talk about. But then, there are the deeper things, and really the main thing is the poverty gap, the wealth gap. And I mean, not to say that we don't have that in the US and Western countries too. I mean, obviously, there's homelessness and poverty everywhere. But in South Africa, it's much more visible, especially if you're living in Joburg. As I mentioned, or like in Cape Town, there are places you can almost forget that there's a wealth gap. But in Joburg, you cannot, because there are people at the robots, at the traffic lights, panhandling, asking for money. We have sprawling, huge informal settlements, with, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people living in like what we call shacks, which is not actually a derogatory term. It's just literally a term, because people build these corrugated iron, structures, on land, open land, and you see that everywhere, and it's just not something you can look away from. So yeah, that's a big one. And then also driving on the other side of the road. Driving in general was actually the biggest culture shock, that I had. I was very afraid to drive when I first moved to South Africa. First of all, we drive on the left, and also even now, a lot of people drive manual or stick shift cars. It's gotten there are more automatic cars than there used to be, but when I first moved here, I had to learn to drive a manual, because I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to get by, without that. So yeah, so you learn to drive on the opposite side of the road. You learn to drive a manual if you want. And also just the roads are crazy, because we have this sort of informal public transport system. They call them taxis, but they're actually what you would think of as a minivan, basically. And these taxis are everywhere, and they tend to drive really erratically, and they'll stop very abruptly to pick up passengers, because there aren't like formal stops. They'll pick you up anywhere, and they just tend to be quite aggressive, and you have to be very aware. And then also traffic lights don't work, and there's potholes. So yeah, driving's a big one. But it's made me a better driver living here. I'm a much better driver than I ever was in the United States, because I'm just much more alert and ready for anything when I'm driving.
South Africa has 11 official languages, a kaleidoscope of cultures, and a dynamic, evolving identity shaped by its colonial history, apartheid legacy, and democratic future. And yet, most South Africans are welcoming, funny, proud, and deeply social. Hospitality runs deep, especially if you make an effort. The bonus is, as I mentioned, English is widely spoken, especially in urban areas, so language won't be a barrier. Although knowing local phrases, Xhosa, Zulu, or Afrikaans, can go a long way. Life in South Africa flows differently. There's more emphasis on quality of life, family, and community. People actually sit down to eat together. Conversations last longer, and no one's afraid of silence. You'll notice there's a slower pace, not lazy, just deliberate. Time is flexible. If someone says they'll arrive just now, that could mean 5 minutes or 45 minutes. And bureaucracy moves slowly. Don't fight it, bring some snacks. Heather Mason describes some of her experiences and offers some advice.
Here, you set up all your payments electronically, and you can very easily send what we call an EFT, which is electronic funds transfer, to anyone that you want to send money to. And you can easily send money through your phone. You send somebody, what's called an e-wallet, and you just sort of, you go into your banking app and you say, I want to send X amount of money to this phone number, and it just sends that person a code, and then they go to an ATM and withdraw the money. So yeah, it's complicated, but once you've sort of been here and established yourself, things actually tend to work pretty well when it comes to like admin stuff like that. But it takes a while. And also registering a car, that's also like, wow, that's like a major undertaking here. And when I first had to register my car, it took me many weeks of driving to many different licensing offices, and often the system's down, or I don't know, there'll be a protest and they'll just close the office, or the office will close a month before Christmas because everybody just goes on leave early. And you kind of have to work around all those things. But also you can usually pay someone to help you. This is something took me many years to realize, but there's like a little business in my local shopping center where I just go to them now and I pay them a little bit of extra money and they sort out all my car registration issues for me. So yeah, it takes a while to figure that stuff out. It's just yeah, and it's something you have to budget time and effort for, and a lot of time just to feel anxious.
A couple of key cultural things to keep in mind. Greetings matter in South Africa. Shake hands, smile, say hello. Be respectful of the country's history and its racial dynamics. It's not a topic to treat lightly. And don't assume your Western lens fits the context. This isn't Europe in disguise. And if you want to make friends, much like in most other places, you can find expat communities, but they often form tight-knit circles. Try not to stay in that bubble. Join interest-based groups, take a local class, or volunteer. South Africans are generally curious and generous, but it may take time to build deep trust. Heather Mason describes what this looks like.
And one thing I think that it's sort of like a little bit of an elephant in the room, but that I have to mention, South Africa is different from other African countries in that we had apartheid here until, as I already mentioned, until the 1990s. And there is a huge white population here. And that just kind of skews everything. It just, there are places you can go, you can be sitting in a restaurant, especially in Cape Town, and you will think you're in Europe. And I think sort of as a white person, people don't other you in the same way because there's just a lot more white people around. And also the main language is English. So if you're an English speaking person here, you don't have that barrier. Especially in Joburg, everyone here speaks English. There are other parts of South Africa where you might go to certain places where people are only speaking Afrikaans or only speaking Zulu or only speaking Sesotho or something, but it's really if you speak English here, it's pretty easy to get to meet people and make friends. And I just find generally people are open-minded and kind of excited to meet, especially Americans. I mean, it sounds kind of weird now, and like the current reality that we have, especially the sort of dynamics that are happening between the United States and South Africa. Believe it or not, people really people are still really into American culture here. And, when I open my mouth and I have an American accent, like people are like curious. They want to know why I'm here. They want to ask me questions. And it's just a good way to make friends, actually.
Okay, so let's talk about something else that people leaving the States are interested in. Are you moving to a safer place than you're leaving? Yes, South Africa has a high crime rate. But that doesn't mean it's dangerous all the time, everywhere. Some basic tips that kind of apply globally: don't flash your wealth. Lock your doors, be street smart, and avoid walking alone at night in unfamiliar neighborhoods. Millions live happily and safely in South Africa. Awareness, not paranoia, is the key. Here's Heather Mason providing a bit more context.
Is Johannesburg safe? Is South Africa safe? And I guess it's an interesting question in the context of like the global situation we currently live in, where there's just seems like all kinds of danger all over the place. And how do you say that any place is safe right now in 2025? But the truth, I mean, the way I usually answer that, well, first of all, I always say I've lived here 15 years. I explored Johannesburg. I've gone to every neighborhood, every township, every part of the city. I often have a camera with me. I've never been the victim of a serious crime. I had my phone pickpocketed once, and occasionally I've had one of the main like crimes that happen here that you'll hear people talk about is like the smash and grab, where somebody will come up to your car window and try to steal your phone. So I always usually keep my phone out of sight, but there've been one or two times where I've had someone come to my window and say they want to steal my phone, and I just drive off and like nothing has ever happened. So that's been my experience with crime here. But having said that, it is true South Africa has by some measures, the greatest wealth inequality in the world. There's a very serious problem here with unemployment, with poverty. And there's also like very, very rich, privileged people. And that has led to, this imbalance that results in a lot of petty crime. So, you do have to, if you drive around in Joburg, you see everyone has everyone has a wall or a fence around their house. Most people have an electric fence. Most people have alarms. There's a lot of security companies. Um, so yeah, it's definitely something. It's not something to be taken lightly or to ignore. Um, but it's never impeded my life here to a serious degree, and I guess I've been fortunate, but yeah. And there's also a perception, the other thing I need to mention is that, South Africa has these two major cities, Johannesburg and Cape Town. Those are always the cities people talk about when it comes, most of the time when people move here, they're considering moving to one of those two cities. And there is this perception that Cape Town is quote unquote better, nicer place to live, more beautiful, and with less crime. But it's actually not really true. The case in Cape Town, for example, it's just there's a big wealth divide there too. But the townships where under apartheid people of color were forced to live tend to be located further outside the city, and the center of Cape Town is still very white dominated, and so there's a perception that like that city is safer, but it really just depends on where you are.
If you're curious, respectful, and ready to embrace a country that's messy, beautiful, generous, and alive in ways you might not expect, you can make a pretty good go of it in South Africa. And if you eventually decide that you want your short-term situation to become, well, longer term, this is how you do it. So let's say you've been in South Africa for a few years. You know how to get to the wine farms without Google Maps. You've got opinions about biltong. You've learned to roll with the load shedding, and you're considering becoming a resident or even a citizen. If you want to become a resident, you can apply for permanent residency under several categories. After 5 years on a temporary residence visa, like a business or critical skills visa, you can apply. You can apply immediately if you qualify under the financially independent permit. And if you're married to a South African and have lived in the country for 2+ years, you can also apply. Once you're approved, you don't have to renew your visa annually. You can work, study, and live freely, and you don't need to give up your U.S. residence or citizenship. But keep in mind that residency can be revoked if you don't reside in South Africa for at least 3 years out of every 5. If you're looking for something even more permanent, citizenship is a longer-term option, and it's available usually after 10 years of legal residency, or 5 years if you're married to a South African. You have to prove a clean criminal record and integration into South African life. You have to show language ability in at least one local language, and yes, English counts, and you have to show an intent to remain in the country. South Africa does allow dual citizenship, but you must apply to retain your U.S. citizenship before becoming South African. Otherwise, you risk losing your American nationality. Permanent residency offers the stability most expats need. Citizenship is a bonus, but it requires long-term commitment and a willingness to fully belong. So who is South Africa right for? If you value a stunning natural environment, a low cost of living, English-speaking communities, outdoor living and incredible food and wine, and a complex but welcoming society, then South Africa might be a great option for you. But be honest with yourself. Are you adaptable? Are you okay with infrastructure that isn't always perfect? Can you embrace contradiction without needing resolution? Because South Africa isn't easy, but it is in many ways magical. You'll never be bored. You'll never stop learning. And you might just find a deeper version of the life you didn't know you were looking for. Here's Heather Mason explaining why she's stayed in South Africa for as long as she has.
I mean, the main reason I still live here after 15 years is, and I mean, obviously this varies from person to person and from situation to situation, but I find South Africa in general, and specifically Johannesburg, to just be one of the friendliest, most open places. I mean, I made friends here really quickly, in a way that I really never did in my whole 35 years of living in America as an American. Yeah, I think the reason I like living in Joburg specifically, as compared to Cape Town or another part of South Africa, is that this really is the hub of Southern Africa. If you have a flight to another part of Africa, it's going to pass through Joburg, before going anywhere else. It's so I find it very accessible. I've traveled a lot throughout Africa, and especially Southern Africa. I've been to, Lesotho, which is the tiny country in the middle of, it's surrounded by South Africa, and Eswatini, which used to be called Swaziland. Those are the nearest two countries. I've been to those countries many, many times. Namibia, Botswana, also Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Zambia, Malawi, all those places. It's really easy to travel to those places from here. And traveling in Southern Africa is really great. Just incredibly beautiful, affordable, if depending on where you're coming from, and just really nice people pretty much everywhere, as a general rule.
Immigrating to South Africa isn't effortless, but it's absolutely possible. Whether you're looking to retire along the southern coast, build a business in Cape Town, contribute your skills to a growing economy, or simply live somewhere where the natural world still feels sacred, South Africa offers you the tools to make that life real. You just have to be willing to use them. It's not a country that hands out easy wins. The visas require paperwork, time, and in some cases, a healthy dose of patience. The systems are complex. The infrastructure can be inconsistent. The energy grid has its moods. And bureaucracy, you'll get to know your local Home Affairs office better than your favorite wine shop. But what South Africa gives in return is something rare. A life that feels rooted, raw and real and humming with possibility. It's a place where the sunsets feel cinematic, where weekend farmers markets exist next to ancient mountains, where strangers still greet each other in the street, and where joy often emerges in the small, defiant moments, over braids, in music, through conversation. It's not for everyone. If what you want is perfect infrastructure, predictability, and pristine public services, you're going to struggle here. But if you're looking for a place that will challenge you, invite you in, stretch your perspective and your patience, and offer you a radically affordable, deeply rich life in return, South Africa could surprise you. You can live comfortably on a modest income, you can access excellent healthcare, you can speak English and be understood, you can live by the sea, in the bush, in a city, or in a vineyard. And yes, you can build a new life in a country still working to heal itself, a country that doesn't pretend to be perfect, but offers you a seat at the table if you show up, eyes open, and heart in. So if you've ever thought about living somewhere completely different, if you're feeling the tug to do something a little more adventurous, a little less conventional, South Africa isn't just an escape, a vacation. It's an arrival, a beginning, not an end. Next week on Leaving America, we'll be talking about all of the tax responsibilities you carry with you as an American living abroad, the treaties and laws that exist that can mitigate or even eliminate your tax burden in the States, and also how you can renounce your American citizenship if that's something you're interested in. This is Leaving America, because sometimes home isn't where you started.